My name is Brianna Bytner, and my novella, This Life, is a low fantasy set in the actual world, reincarnation narrative told through the alternating perspectives of the two main characters, mentally transported back and forth between contemporary Michigan and Joseon Dynasty era Korea. It explores themes of nostalgia, anxiety, and new adulthood. Having studied abroad in South Korea, I wanted to incorporate my appreciation for and knowledge of Korean history and culture. The work draws influence from the Chinese television drama Scarlet Heart, or in Mandarin 步步惊心, and Octavia Butler's novel Kindred, both of which approach time travel and its social and psychological effects in different manners. And now I will read an excerpt from chapter 1 of the novella. Now Eli sat on a rickety bench near the wall. He couldn't find the energy to talk to anyone, and instead eavesdropped on passing conversations. All his former classmates were starting their careers, getting married, or moving abroad. They all had real lives, but not Eli. Everything he heard made him shrink further and further into the dark shroud he found himself comfortable in. He wasn't there, not really. It wasn't even 11:30, the time he'd allowed for himself, when he got up, shoulders slouched, and wove through the crowd towards the exit. Then a girl ran into him, knocking his phone to the ground and breaking the case in two. There went one day's worth of minimum wage. But before he could manage a snide retort, he saw that the girl before him was glowing. Literally, a faint silver light emanated from her head, not exactly like a halo, but as though a lamp was stuck behind her radiant brown eyes. Her dark curls elegantly framed her face. As bright as she was, nobody seemed to notice. Then when he reached out to take his phone from her hands and brushed hers, something strange happened. He couldn't hear the music anymore, but something else rang around them. Was it a bell? Once they broke contact, Eli flinched back. "I'm so incredibly sorry. I can get you a new case," she said. Eli couldn't force any words from his mouth. He could only stare at her and the moonlight that emanated from beneath her skin. But she failed to return his gaze, and before he could say anything, someone else pulled her away. Eli stayed there, shaken, kneeling on the ground. Next thing he knew, he could see the same girl talking to someone in the distance, then abruptly pushed her way out the front door. Eli stood, got to his senses, and went after her. As soon as Eli met the night air, his voice once again got caught in his throat. From the forest came a similar light, glowing through the bushes. The girl's back faced him as she wandered up the mountain trail. She was no longer glowing, but Eli knew it was her, and on impulse followed. He became entranced by the forest's eerie glow as the path grew steeper, leading them to the mountain's peak. Each tree looked as though it hid the light from behind its leaves, illuminating the darkness, but each time Eli passed it, the light seemed to retract further into the woods. Eli's legs burned as they reached the top of the mountain. The trees shortened and were sparse, allowing a view of the city he hadn't seen in years. The girl stood before the silver radiating from the ground. But what was it? Eli cleared his throat and took a few careful steps towards her. "Hey!" The girl whirled around, looking surprised that a stranger had followed her all this way without her knowing. She immediately brought her hand to a small beaded purse that dangled from her shoulder. "Sorry to scare you, but Why did you follow me without saying anything?" Eli pointed to the ground beside her feet. "That. You can see it too?" The girl nodded. Her shoulders dropped an inch. "I don't know what it is." Eli stepped closer and crouched down. Sure enough, the light was buried beneath the dirt. "Let's dig it out," he said, his words escaping him. Right. I'm Eli." "I'm Mina." She bent down across from him, and the two dug into the dirt. They clawed repeatedly through the earth's dry ashes. Mina kept her distance as though to avoid touching Eli's hand again, but Eli couldn't help but think there was almost something familiar about her. A small band of blue peeked out from the dirt. The last juice of its light wavered. Eli retracted his arms. It looked like the side of a bracelet. Mina pulled it out and held it in her palm. The two rose to their feet as the air felt lighter, as though the gravity wanted to lift them into the sky. The bracelet glimmered in Mina's hand, an awe-inspiring hue. And without a second thought, Eli reached out and touched its rim. Immediately, the world around them was immersed in a cloud of dust. Eli closed his eyes. He felt as though someone had put their hands on his shoulders and pushed him down. His body felt warm, then excruciatingly hot. The bracelet he touched burned his hand, but he couldn't let go. He heard Mina scream, and he opened his eyes. The girl before him was not the same one he'd run into.